what's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geek, otherwise known as TWIG, the flagship of stupidity. I am one of your hosts. This evening, this morning, or whatever the hell you're listening to it, I'm Mike the Birdman Dodd, but I'm not alone as I trek through the world of stupid, occasionally console launches. I'm joined with...
Alex.
Is it really a console, though, when you really break it down? Service?
Ecosystem is probably the best way to call it, right? Like, okay, it's a whole new platform, maybe.
So, yes. If you can't guess what we're kind of talking around, this past week, or last week rather, Stadia launched, and it was a monumental, out of the gate kind of
It was a botched launch. Not... People are in the media, or people, I'm going to say in quotes, the media, or people think they're in the media. A lot of YouTubers are decrying failure immediately based on them trying to get extra views, which I do find kind of funny that people are calling it a failure on a platform that is owned by the company they're calling a failure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of ironic there, but it's not that it's a failure because the service works. But it is a rough launch. It probably, just prefacing it, probably should have been pushed back 3 months. So you know how it's not going to go open for the free service, like the regular service, to everybody until January or so. That's probably where they should have put the Founders Editions, and then waited until March, April, or May until releasing, just based so they could have worked out some of these kinks. But then again, some of these kinks may not have been worked out at all anyway if they didn't notice them, right? So I'll give a bit of a background. I was somebody who pre-ordered the Stadia the first day. Like the day it went up, it was pre-ordered. I did not receive it until 2 days after launch. I luckily was one of the people that received their activation code immediately, which is which was funny because there are people still waiting for their activation code. They have hardware and they can't play it yet. Those people, to be honest, should be getting refunds. They should be sending their system back or something. I would be monumentally peeved if I wasn't part of the media. And first of all, preface to this, I paid for this outright. This came out of pocket. This was not something provided to us for free or for review or consideration or anything. I paid as a retail, end user. And I got my code basically when I expected it to, because I didn't pay for faster shipping. So, it was going to take a day at least for shipping. Cool. But there are people that have been waiting now a week and still can't access their system. Those people, I should probably return it for a refund and say, give me a refund or give me some free games or something, because you can't release a product that you can't use. But that's an argument for another day.
Yeah.
As far as this, how it actually works, I've had no issues. Wirelessly, I've heard people keep saying that the Chromecast heats up and can turn off when you're playing 4K HDR for over an hour. I can explain a couple of reasons as to why. One, it's not the best cooling solution in there. It's just basically a heat spreader, and it connects to the plastic. And most people are plugging it directly into the back of their TV, which is pressed up against the wall. So there's not a whole lot of airflow.
Well vented anyway.
And those people, for the most part, are using Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi heats things up, especially on the 5G network. So in the power adapter that comes with it comes with a port for gigabit Ethernet, which is sweet. So, and people are saying, well, shouldn't you be playing? Isn't the point behind this advertising that it's completely wireless? No. They said that it doesn't take up console space. They never said that you shouldn't plug it into to the Ethernet. And if you're playing 4K and you want, the lowest latency, you're going to want to be connected through Ethernet. So with plugging it in through the Ethernet in my room, and I also got a little adapter for like $2 that lets me plug the both male ends of an HDMI cable into it. So my Stadia doesn't have to, or my Chromecast doesn't have to be plugged directly behind my TV. I can have it sitting on a table, which is what I did. And I also, just for good measure, I had a bunch of little mini heat sinks used for like single board computers like the Raspberry Pi. And I stuck a bunch of them to the top of it. And because that apparently just reduces the temperature by 10 degrees or so that it won't overheat. But for the most part, the TV in my bedroom isn't HDR. It does 4K, but I set the thing to 1080p just so I can get the maximum performance out of it. It's cool to the touch. It's not heating up. It's only if you're, making poor choices with ventilation, just like any device. Like if you put your Xbox or your PS4 in a drawer, what's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that out of the way. The interface is good. It works well. The controller's really well made. Like we're talking better than the Pro controller for the Switch. People have complained about the triggers being a little loose. The triggers aren't loose. They just feel more like the analog triggers from like back in the day on the Dreamcast. If you know what I mean.
I have to see how it feels because I'm obviously a first-person shooter kind of guy.
They are spring-loaded. They're not like the newer ones where they're sort of just held in place. It feels a lot like the triggers on like the same amount of give that you had on a Dreamcast controller. You know, it's easier to pull back than the GameCube. And it's a little looser feeling than like the PS3 DualShock. So yeah, honestly, the Dreamcast is the closest I can say, and maybe the original Duke controllers for the Xbox.
Okay.
So that's a general feel. Again, controller very, very, very well made. Feels really good. Games work fine. Activating games, interesting story. So the redeem button is not available in the app. To preface this, you need to buy any games, you must be using using the Stadia app, which, by the way, as far as right now, only works on certain phones. Basically, the Pixel phones play it all. The app doesn't let you do certain things on other Android phones. So you have to have a compatible phone to then purchase games. Cool. The redeem button is not in that app. You have to go to a Windows or Macintosh computer with the Chrome browser, and it must be a computer. You can't do it mobilely because the mobile site doesn't work. You have to then go down 2 or 3 clicks deep into your account to find the activate spot. So if you're going to activate a game that you were given as a gift as a promo code, or if you're in our case where we get review copies of games, you get them as a digital code. I had to go to customer service to get help, and the customer service couldn't help me because the version of the website on their end is different than the version that's publicly facing. So the button's in different places based on where they say it's supposed to be and where it is actually right now. So they thanked me for my help, and then they said that they were actually going to talk to the coding team to get that fixed ASAP. Because as of right now, you cannot just activate it very simply, and there are no instructions to help you do that. You actually have to go to customer service if you don't know where it is. So,
good times.
Yes. So basically, this was not half baked. Like all the features are there. They just sort of launched everything haphazardly, and it will all but clearly be fixed by January when it goes public for the mainstream. So everybody's saying that it's an early beta. That's pretty much what it is.
I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with Stadia. I'm sure we'll have some extended thoughts on it at some point on the show. So
and we will be having a review of Just Dance 2020, which now that I finally was able to activate works.
So yeah, we will wait and see what happens with that. Trying to think what's been going on with me this past week. Truthfully, it's actually been kind of quiet. I've actually been playing a lot of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I've actually been playing that a crap ton because the Battle Pass supposedly drops very soon in December for that game, which means monetization was coming at some point. We all kind of knew this, but we don't know what it's going to look like. So we'll have to wait and see whether I stick with this game. I've been playing a lot with former Screw Attack and the Game Heroes alumni Handsome Tom, playing with that game, and we have been quote-unquote shitting on kids. We had one game, my favorite game mode to play is Hardpoint, where you have to hold different positions and get to a certain point number. Typically, or the number is always 250 points. We shut out several lobbies, 250 to nothing, with me and Handsome Tom holding the positions by ourselves.
So what you're saying is the experience that you and I had on Spec Ops is very different than if we were to play together on the multiplayer aspect.
Which is weird because now they've added more Spec Ops missions, but they haven't addressed the underlying difficulty and AI problems. So figure that one out. Here's some more crap that doesn't work, but party on.
So basically, if I reinstalled it and hopped on with you guys, we'd probably have a good time.
If you joined our multiplayer lobbies, yes, that's what I mean. Yes. Destroy kids.
So maybe I'll have to let the system reinstall the 130 gigs overnight.
Oh yeah, because now with all the patches, it's gotten a little bit bigger. So It's ridiculous. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Speaking of this week's show, which we're going to get to right now, pretty much, we got some interesting reviews on this week's show. I'm going to have a revision, or impressions, rather, of Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty. That's right, Wizards of the Coast and Adult Swim sent me a copy of the new Rick and Morty D&D box set. I'll be talking about that in the rule book is called Big Rick Energy. Or no, sorry, that's the dungeon, the Lost Dungeon of Rickedness, Big Rick Energy. And the Rick and Morty rulebook, which actually does change a couple of rules and introduces some new ones that I'm actually rather fond of. I'm also going to be reviewing, and this one may come as a bit of a surprise here, but from Paramount Home Entertainment, I'll be talking about Dora and the Lost City of Gold, which came out in August, which didn't get a lot of attention, I felt, and I'm going to say right off the hop here, deserved a lot more attention than what it got.
Just for the Starship Troopers reference alone in
it. More for me was the Terminator reference.
Yeah, true.
I was like, huh,
like
and Jango Fett.
I was by far the oldest person seeing it in theaters when I went, but it was good.
I was pleasantly surprised by it. So I will talk about that a little bit later in the show. And Alex, what do you have for us this week?
I have a review of the Nvidia Shield TV, the 2019 version, the one that looks like a like a toilet paper roll. If that makes any sense. It's a tube in that exact shape and size, not the traditional box version. This is the new revision that has the Tegra X1 Plus chip in it. So basically, it has the same CPU and GPU that is in the Switch Lite and the new revision of the Nintendo Switch.
That's pretty cool. So that's what we got coming up. And of course, news. I was literally about to say news, weather, and sports. No, this is not the radio.
I guess if you count wrestling sports, we could talk about wrestling.
Oh, what a fucking joke 99% of that has been recently. But anyway, we will not be making racist jokes about starvation on this particular podcast. Thank you, Jim Cornette.
Well, no, not today.
not today. Anyway, so we will be back here on This Week in Geek. I'm been Mike the Birdman Dodd with Alex the producer, and here is my review of Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty.
This is a Meeseeks box. Let me show you how it works. You press this.
I'm Mr. Meeseeks! Look at me!
You make a request. Mr. Meeseeks, open Jerry's stupid mayonnaise jar.
Yes, sirree!
The Meeseeks fulfills the request.
All done!
Wow! And then it stops existing.
Oh my god, he exploded!
Trust me, they're fine with it. Knock yourselves out. Just keep your requests simple. They're not gods.
We are talking Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty by Wizards of the Coast and Adult Swim. A review copy of this box set was provided to me. As you guys can guess, I'm a pretty big fan of D&D 5th edition since it's been out for a couple years, and also Rick and Morty, which is a weird show, to say the least, and I've even had Szechuan sauce. I love that stuff. I even have my cats have a Mr. Meeseeks toy that they occasionally like to drag around and play with. So when these properties cross paths in a comic book form, I thought that was pretty neat because the guy who wrote it, Jim Zub, is a pretty big D&D nerd himself. So naturally it makes sense for these guys to cross paths. And the Rick and Morty box set, which I'm just going to call it from here on out, is an interesting introduction to the world of D&D. Basically what this is a box set that contains a 64-page rulebook, a 44-page adventure called The Lost Dungeon of Rickedness, Big Rick Energy, a DM screen, which is wonderfully illustrated, also 5 pre-generated characters, and 11 polyhedral dice, reading that right off the back. So what this is, it's essentially like the D&D Starter Edition, except with a Rick and Morty flavor. In fact, reading through the rule book, there are some rules that do change for this. They also give it sort of Rick and Morty flair, where you'll see Rick kind of giving commentary on the rules, explaining at the end of the day, the rules don't matter as long as you're having fun, go big or go home. And there are some pretty fun new rules that I almost want to introduce into my game. And one of the rules I like, it's what happens when you critically fail. Normally rolling a 1 on a d20 is bad news to begin with. So what this new table does is when you roll a critical one, you then roll an additional d12. And you might have results where your magical items suddenly become non-magical, or your hair might fall out everywhere. Or, my favorite rule, your internal organs turn into stinging bees. You die, no saving throw, the end, game over. I like that rule. That's where if you really want to screw with people, you can do that. One of my other favorite things that it does is it takes these spells for wizards and clerics and kind of gives them a Rick Sanchez spin as he explains spells like, say, Revivify, which he kind of gives a little sidebar saying, have you tried not dying? Or explaining other spells like, yeah, this spell kind of sucks, but what are you going to do? It's useful here, I guess, maybe. And I kind of like that. It kind of gives you the flair for it. And though fundamentally it is still a D&D starter set at the end of the day. If you've played D&D in any shape or form, you are already familiar with these rules, though that does make it pretty accessible for new game masters if they want to run this as a straight one-shot, though the big draw here will be the adventure, which is called The Lost Dungeon of Rickedness, which is Big Rick Energy. And what that is a series of rooms which have a theme to them. Like, for one example, there's like a treasure room, and there's like a test in it. And I'm not going to spoil what it is, but don't being a douchebag is your best option here. That's what I'll say. And a lot of the jokes in Big Rick Energy depend on landing it. If you're familiar with the Rick and Morty properties, you will have a lot of fun with this. There's a room that involves a Mr. Meeseeks, and if you've seen that episode in Season 1 where Mr. Meeseeks, look at me, it totally plays upon that idea where you can summon a Meeseeks to do anything, though Meeseeks are a level 1 commoner. They can't do much, but they can help you, and if they don't, they get frustrated and may eventually try to murder you after 1d4 hours. That's kind of cool. They also have references to the show. For example, when that big giant head who shows up and says, show me what you got, he shows up as like this beholder-like creature that guards treasure. And it all builds to kind of a neat conclusion at the end of the dungeon. I'm not going to spoil it. The adventure itself really depends upon your enjoyment of Rick and Morty, or your ability to play up ridiculousness. If you have someone who's vaguely familiar with it, they'll probably get some of the jokes, especially when reading some of the flavor text. And this is where I think the box set maybe has its weakest problem, is that this is a box set that is definitely meant for the Rick and Morty fan in mind, which means a lot of these jokes will only land with fans who are intimately familiar with the Rick and Morty setting. That's not to say it's a bad thing, but it's a sort of the joke you can only ever tell once. But if you play this with different groups and they're familiar with Rick and Morty, they're going to have a good time. And you're only meant to go through levels 1 to maybe 3 going through the dungeon. Though I think the rules allow you to go up higher if you want. Like, they say you could go up as high as experience level 6. I think I remember seeing that. You do get some pre-generated characters, though. You get Beth, who is a cleric. You get Jerry, who is a wizard. You get Morty, who is a rogue. You get, I'm kind of reading them here at the same time here, so just give me a sec. You also get Meatface, who's a fighter. And you get Summer, who is a fighter as well. Though I thought she would have been a rogue, or not a rogue, a ranger, given her ability to use the bow. That's what I would have done. But it does give you a fairly balanced party. You do have healing, you do have the ability to fight, and you do have some spell firepower. So you're not going into this dungeon without a fairly decent party makeup. And the dungeon itself, it's fairly well designed. It's pretty goofy with some of its puzzles. And it is meant to be funny, more so than anything. This is not meant for a serious role-playing group. So, can I recommend this? If you want to get someone who's a Rick and Morty fan into D&D, This is probably a pretty good way to do it. I actually had a conversation about this on Twitter with someone who says, I love Rick and Morty, I'm getting into D&D, would you recommend it? I'm like, yeah, sure, check it out. It would be kind of fun. However, that being said, it's a very niche product. I'm not seeing a completionist will seek this out to complete their collection, but the average person, unless you're a Rick and Morty fan, you could probably skip this because a lot of the humor is very centered in that world. So, unlike, say, the Stranger Things box set, which was a little bit more generic, this is more highly specialized, and this is a year where we've seen multiple box sets released. We saw this, we saw the Essentials kit, and I think Stranger Things came out, it was either this year or last year. So, either way, I do like Dungeons & Dragons versus Rick and Morty, but make sure the person you're buying it for is a fan, or if you're going to run it, make sure you got the right group to run it through.
Not so fast, Morty. You heard your mom. We've got adventures to go on, Morty. Just you and me. And sometimes your sister and sometimes your mom. But never your dad. You want to know why, Morty? Because he crossed me.
Okay, take it easy, Rick. That's dark.
Oh, it gets darker, Morty. Welcome to the darkest year of our adventures.
News on the march!
You're listening to TWIG, the flagship of stupidity. Aren't you glad you are? Because, hey, you're going to join us on this trip into the news this week as I'm joined with Alex, the producer, and we're going to talk about something, well, not good to start off this particular news segment. So, within the last couple of weeks, Disney Plus has launched to near universal success and acclaim, I would argue, though in Canada we're still missing a few things. Give me my X-Men Evolution, you son of a bitch. However, due to their 10 million subscriber count, you may have noticed maybe some weird things are happening on your account. You might be wondering, well, Mike, Alex, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you aware that your account may have been stolen? So, according to a report from globalnews.ca and other news outlets, thousands of Disney Plus accounts have been hacked and are being sold online on the dark web, according to a report that was published last Monday. Tech news website ZDNet published a story where it found thousands of Disney Plus accounts were either being offered for free or sold online across several hacking forums. Some of the accounts are priced as low as $4 and as much as $14.50. The cost of a subscription for Disney Plus in Canada is $8.99 a month, well below the cost of what was being sold online. In a statement to Global News, Disney did not confirm whether or not the accounts on its platform were being hacked, but said there was no sign of a security breach on Disney. They did say, however, Disney takes the privacy and security of our users' data very seriously, and there's no indication of a security breach on Disney Plus, said a Disney spokesperson. I heard this a while ago, that this was happening. Now, several users of the service have taken the social media to voice their frustration, while some complaining they had completely lost access to their account after hackers logged them out and changed their passwords. There are some screenshots from Twitter. This person I can't pronounce, I guess she's a person on Twitter, told Global News that she woke up to an email Sunday indicating that her Disney Plus password had been changed. After logging into Disney Plus app, she said she found several new viewer profiles on her account despite changing her password several times. As well as the email linked to her account, the intruder was still logged in. Unlike Netflix, I don't think Disney Plus logs off devices once the password has been changed. So once they initially logged in, they're now in forever, and it doesn't give an option to log out on other devices. And that's just an oversight. Like, that should have been something they should have really thought of.
Even at like Apple and PlayStation, all these things, what you can do is you can log into your master account, and then where it shows your login authorizations, and you can just click a button to kick everybody out, and then you start from scratch. You can only do it like once every 6 months.
Yep. Or you call them, or you call the service directly, and they'll
but like, if you want to do it manually, it's like once every 6 months you can do it. Yep. So like, that's something that people have had for running on 15 years now, 16 years. Yep. Most actually, well, it would be whenever iTunes went mainstream. So like 2002, 2003. Yep. So like, we've had it 15, 16 years with every other service. Even like how bad Nintendo is with that. Nintendo has that option to go in and deauthorize things. I'm surprised Disney didn't think of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a simple oversight too. Like this should have been something like, guys, what if this happens? And they should have had like a security guy on the team. I mean, and I've been a victim of people trying to hack my Netflix account a couple of years ago, and I was getting really weird logins, like in like Eastern Europe, and I was like,
Yeah.
the fuck?
We also had it. You had it for. I've had it fairly frequently for EA. I get emails all the time, like where it has like, please use this authentication code because I have like a 2-step authentication, and it's always Russia. It's always in Russian dialect. It's EA, Ubisoft accounts, a lot of gaming accounts are like that. But as long as you set up two,
And
I get
Epic Store accounts are the worst.
and I literally get messages 2 or 3 times a day, and I can change my password 4 or 5 times. And I'm using secure logins without any key. Nobody's tracking my keystrokes or anything here, and I'll still within a few days somebody's tried to access it. So they're getting master lists of emails from somewhere, and the only way to really protect yourself is to have a 2-step authentication where it texts you or emails you preferably texting you because it's a little more secure, a code to put in. And all I don't even bother contacting them. I just leave it. So because as long as you leave it, they can't actually log in anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are some 2-factor authentications that are a little more vulnerable because there was a friend of mine who was having trouble with her Yahoo email, and the 2-factor authentication was going to another email she didn't have control over, and the hacker was getting access to some shit that way. And this person is a fairly public-facing figure, and I do not envy her in the least dealing with this stupid bullshit. Because the hackers generally sometimes you do some wonderful things, and other times not so much. So I guess the moral of the story here is make sure your passwords you're not using the same one across multiple sites. Make them long if you can, uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, and special characters. That's how I do a lot of mine. I make mine incredibly long.
Yours are incredibly stupidly
Insane.
long. In fact, sometimes I know, like when when you've changed passwords, you sometimes have to shorten them because depending on if it's a good site or a good service and they're using much longer keys, like 28 letters or more, which is great. But some security protocols still only allow like 8 to 12 characters. And like these are new services. It's actually the Disney Club. You can only have I think 10 characters in your password,
which is
and
weird.
it will truncate it and not let you use anymore. And it's like that's like what passwords used to be like 25 years ago. Like it doesn't make any sense.
That's not as secure as it should be.
Yeah, and some sites will say 16 characters max, and I mean that's just basically to maintain compatibility with lots of security protocols. But anything good will allow usually up to 32. And most people don't use anything more like that. But some of yours are like 30, 40 characters.
Or 40. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pain in the butt.
If you want my shit, you are working for it.
And you know what? I've started to do that. I've started to make some of mine like not super long, but a mixture of like a common word with a made up word that isn't really real, and then a few characters in that. And the way I get around that is having to type it every time. I don't usually want it to save in my, master password list, like to auto login. But a lot of things now allow biometric login through like a fingerprint on your phone, even through like a mobile app. So I'll make my passwords very difficult, but then make it so that, yes, you can have one button login as long as you're using a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, it's as safe as it's going to get for, I'm not looking for, we're not working for the government or something where we need to have like a USB key just to plug in just to even be able to put in your password or something. We don't need security keys for everything. But a smart move would be to not use like password 1 2 3 4. No, but to go with something in the realm of 12 to 20 characters.
Yeah, like make it something that only you would think of and make it unique, obviously. So be smarter with your passwords. So moving on to our next story, and I can't believe I have to fucking say this one. So this one comes courtesy of Comic Book Movie. And this is a quote from Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. Making a Star Wars film is difficult due to lack of comics and novels, as Lucasfilm president. She was quoted as saying, "There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels." So this one comes recently. She was speaking to Rolling Stone, and she touched on the difficulties of making episodes 7 through 9. And she says, every one of these movies is particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-plus page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next alliteration might be. We go through a really normal development process that everybody else does. You start talking to filmmakers who you think exhibit the sensibilities that you're looking for. If this is not one of the most bullshit statements I have ever heard from somebody in charge of a major fucking IP, I don't know what fucking is.
I think I know. Can I be the voice of reason, even though I know it's wrong?
Yes. Yes.
I think what she needed to preface it by saying is, since we officially threw out everything that wasn't in the movies and Clone Wars out of canon, I don't know if there's some sort of agreement there. Like, they could easily pull them up, but they had said so many times before that everything that was EU was being thrown out. So my only thought there is, while they own Lucas film, they own all that stuff, do they own everything, or is there some sort of deal in place from before where some of those previous works are co-owned by the writers?
Well, I'd wonder, because Dark Horse Comics did Star Wars comics for a really long time, and then Marvel picked up the license sometime in the mid-2010s.
And if you notice, they haven't reprinted any of them. They're not even doing hardcovers.
I think they've printed some of them. I really do. I'm not 100% sure on that one, though. But I know some of the characters have transitioned. For example, Timothy Zahn's character of Grand Admiral Thrawn, who appeared in the early 90s in the Thrawn trilogy, is now a main character in Star Wars Rebels. And there are novels that are now considered canon, because anything that comes out now is considered canon. And I know he exists there.
Yeah, like, so wasn't it the only thing that was considered canon from before the merger was the Clone Wars cartoon, right?
Yes, yeah. Clone Wars is considered canon, Rebels is considered canon, and Resistance is considered canon, plus The Mandalorian.
So they could just pull from them.
Yeah, plus there are novels that take place after this, and there are comic book series produced by Marvel, which are considered canon too. I mean,
and if they want to go by
storytellers,
if they want to go by things they own outright, probably the easiest story to adapt, if you wanted to adapt a story that's not part of, like, because now that the trilogy is coming to an end, that's going to be it for that Skywalker stuff, right? So here's a question: why not adapt Shadows of the Empire? It's a title that I would say the vast majority of people, even people that never played the game, know the name or know of the story behind it, because it was so immensely popular. Like, because remember, when it came out, it was before Episode 1.
Yes, Shadows of the Empire came out in 1996.
It was
as a multimedia project.
It wasn't
video games, comic books.
Yeah, I don't believe it was a launch title for the N64, but it was out within the launch window of the first couple months.
Yes, it came out in, I want to say, March or April of the launch window. I'm not 100% sure of that, because it's one of the games. It was one
of those things where almost everybody that owned the N64 owned that game.
The problem with adapting Shadows of the Empire, you're about 20 years too late to do it.
But
however,
you could almost argue that Rogue One.
But the problem with adapting Shadows is it's a little too on the nose in terms of you just happen to be involved in these events.
Oh, no, I don't.
It's a little
I
too
don't
fan
mean.
fiction-y.
Well, but you could say that about Rogue One. Or about Solo.
Rogue One was always kind of hinted around and talked around, and I want to say there was probably a Lucasfilm Bible, because certain events in the EU were never talked about, like until they were expanded upon in the movies, such as
I forgot
the Clone Wars, for example.
The other things that they admitted, the only other things that are in the timeline are is the Old Republic game. Is canon. I don't believe Knights of the Old Republic is canon, though.
No.
But
however, if they went back and did a Knights of the Old Republic movie, That would be pretty successful. And there were talks about it. That's
'Cause you-
what that's what the Game of Thrones guys were going to do. They're going to do the origins of the Jedi.
So if they do that, it'll probably go back to the old Republic, the MMO, because that one is canon. Because when they purchased the company, it's still running, so it's still being actively updated. So that is, so you could go there, and with Shadows of the Empire, I don't mean adapting the game or the multimedia property direct, but you could take the characters, you could take the basic story that is canon, and that is something that people would know. And like they're always saying, "Oh, you can't pull." What was her words, that you can't pull from it because there's nothing to pull from that people would know. People know Shadows of the Empire.
If they did Shadows of the Empire, I think if they did it as an animated property, you'd be okay.
You know what else would work?
What?
Was it Rogue Trooper? Was that what it was called? The
Republic Commando?
Republic Commando, that's the one. Yeah.
That would be a very interesting idea for a TV series.
Do a Disney Plus. Do it as a 2 or 3 part miniseries movie. Like three 1.5 hour parts.
I think that would be good, because I've said for years, if Star Wars could do Band of Brothers but with clone troopers, it might be legitimately really good. Plus, Tamora Morrison could use the work.
Well, and in playing that, like when you play the game, like it was so interesting. The first half of the game is Band of Brothers. We're all good, we're all great. And then there's that transition point where, for whatever reason, your character doesn't necessarily turn right away. And you just start seeing the chaos happening around you. You see your own people shooting everybody else, and you're basically fighting against it. And then you black out, and you wake up in the middle of hunting down the Jedis like nothing happened. So, like, you could do that in there. You could do it as a 2-parter. Make it a 1.5 hour movie where it builds up to the Order.
If you had a movie, I'm going to go with your idea. Call it Star Wars Order 66. And you have a band of clone commandos, Republic commandos, and they're hunting down Jedi. You could maybe pull that off, and you could maybe have the clone troopers turn, because in the Clone Wars animated series, that's part of what activated Order 66. There was like a chip in their head which made them follow orders, but not every chip went off.
And that's what happens. You remember playing the game? You were you're different. You're sort of special. The chip doesn't work for you immediately, and eventually.
No, that's not how the game went.
No.
How the game went.
I'm saying, remember, you get blurred vision. You see things changing around you, and you're one of the last ones to change.
That doesn't happen in Republic Commando.
Yeah, remember
I know this game like the back of my hand.
You're playing the mission. The order goes off, and you black out, and you wake up, and now you're basically killing the people you were protecting.
No, your last mission happens on Kashyyyk because you're hunting down General Grievous, and he gets away. First mission happens on Geonosis. Second mission happens on a Transdotian freighter, and then the last mission happens on Kashyyyk, where you're hunting down General Grievous just before Episode 3 starts. I played this game a lot when I was growing up. It's one of those games where it's easy to get properties confused. Plus, if you have seen some of the Clone Wars stuff, I could see maybe where you're getting confused. But adapting other basically, if Star Wars keeps this idea of moving away from Jedi for a while, I'm okay with this. Because The Mandalorian is proving a Boba Fett movie would have fucking worked. And I think Jon Favreau this is his middle finger, or his great triumph, saying, you said a Boba Fett movie wouldn't work? Yeah, well, look at these numbers, motherfucker.
What wasn't this sort of based on the idea when that movie fell apart?
I don't know. I've never heard anything about what the Boba Fett script was supposed to be like. And Boba Fett's fate in the EU, in the now Legends stuff, he survived the Sarlacc pit and whatever. However, that being said, in canon, there is a novel, or there's a line where a worker on Tatooine goes to a Jawa sandcrawler and finds a corroded, acid-burned set of Mandalorian armor. But it's never said whose armor it is.
Oh, okay. Now I know.
There.
Now, do you remember when they were originally talking about doing the Star Wars series? when it was going to be on regular TV. Was it like
Yep.
almost 10 years ago? Wasn't
Before that, 1997, they started talking about
No,
it.
I'm talking right when George Lucas was working on it before he sold the company.
Yep.
It was dark something or other was the idea behind it. It was supposed to be when they were hunting down the Jedis.
So Order 66 type stuff.
Yeah, but it was going to be going to be about basically Jedi hunters.
That would have been interesting.
And they said that it was too expensive and the technology wasn't there, and it sort of feels like some of the plot lines, some of the ideas behind that are what ended up in this. Now, I'm only 2 episodes in because I'm waiting.
Oh my God! Wait
here's
till you
why.
see 3.
Here's why. My brother wants to see it with me, but we get together every Wednesday to hang out. So I have to wait from Friday to Wednesday to watch.
I will say this about episode 3. The person who directed it is in charge of the Obi-Wan series that's going to come out next year or the year after. That series is in beautifully adept hands.
Okay, good.
Oh my God, is that series going to be so good? Yeah, I'm looking forward to
Now,
it. So,
what
Kathleen
other
Kennedy, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
What other series do you think that could go there? I do think a 2-part Order 66 would be good. First part, Band of Brothers. Second part, disastrous, like the aftermath. How interesting would it be if you spent an hour and a half getting to know all these clones? Like they all have distinct personalities, and then the Order flips, and that's when it hits basically it goes to credits in the first part, just as the Order hits, and like a Jedi turns around and they start shooting at him. And then
I think that'd be fantastic.
And then the second episode, they do it, a week or 2 apart as a special event, maybe during Christmas or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part starts up, and now you're still viewing the exact same troopers, but all the personality's gone.
It's funny you mentioned that because Jon Favreau had recently said in some kind of an interview, some kind of a public-facing statement, that he wants to do another Star Wars holiday special. And they actually mentioned Life Day in The Mandalorian, which I thought was a nice little wink and nod to the original 1978 holiday special. So yeah, I mean, the possibilities here are endless because Disney's got, to pardon the phrase, that Disney money, and people love me some Star Wars.
Are there any other shows or movies you think that you'd like them to tackle? I think
obviously the military stuff is big for me. Jedi stuff, I think we've seen enough for right now. More animated projects is good. I haven't seen any of Star Wars Resistance, but I hear it's really good. Rebels was friggin' fantastic.
It would be interesting to expand upon like a particular planet. Like I don't mean necessarily go like Krypton style or Caprica, but think about like a show, a political show based on the Republic.
Yeah, that could be really cool.
Where you could slowly
criminal show,
because then
that's what the Mandalorian is.
But you could slowly, like a police procedural. You mean like you could slowly delve into all the different countries and nations, basing it almost like a Law and Order type show. Think about that.
Yeah, the possibilities are definitely there. So to move on to our next story, this one doesn't surprise me, but I'm a little surprised about the time frame. So last year, Capcom released fairly successfully and is up for Game of the Year nominations, Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. And reports are coming from several different sources, according to Kotaku, as well as several other prominent YouTubers, that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is in the works. It has been well underway for quite some time and will receive a release date sometime in 2020. That would be one hell of a way for the PS4 and Xbox One to go out on.
Well,
because there's no way they're not going to waste that Mr. X tech.
No,
and Nemesis was a lot more aggressive than Mr. X ever was.
No, sorry, did you say what they had a target release time for that?
Sometime in 2020. If this was a PlayStation 5 or Xbox 2 launch title,
I'm thinking it will be.
Take my money now.
Because if it was coming out in March, like the last one was March, something like that.
No, January.
Yeah, it's too close. They would already have a date.
Well, there's rumors that there might be some Resident Evil 2 DLC coming because Steam updates its client, and Resident Evil 2 recently got updated with an achievement placeholder. And there was some DLC released last year called Ghost Survivors, which did add not true story DLC, but extra characters you could play in as. So
It's probably going to be a multi-console, like a multi-generation game, available on both. If we, what the Game Awards are in 2 weeks?
yes,
2.5, yeah.
which we will be covering them.
Yes. When the Game Awards, if they show a trailer there, if it doesn't have a definitive date, then you can expect it to be a holiday release. It doesn't make sense to release it during the summer, that kind of game, especially that close to a new system, unless they say coming summer, PS4, Xbox One, holiday, PS4 or PS5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you don't see a date on it, they're going to show something. They will.
I hope so.
Because let's be honest, Capcom doesn't have really anything else to show for the next little while. Like, they've got Monster Hunter, but like they need something to showcase at this Game Awards.
Yeah, I really think them showing off at least a teaser trailer, because I think it was last Game Awards we got the trailer for Resident Evil 2, and a lot of us were like, what the fuck is this?
And it was out within like a month and a half. Yeah. So if we don't get much other than a teaser for it, then it's going to be something that they show off at E3. But do not expect this early in the year, like, especially since they just announced it. Like, it seems odd. Like, the tech's there, but this is a game that is more demanding. I remember playing a bit of it back in the day. It was a more demanding and more advanced game than the last one. So sure, the engine's there, but is the engine ready to like do what they need to do with, like, Nemesis? Think about this. Back then, Nemesis showed up at certain areas at certain times, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could completely randomize him with the new tech.
Oh yeah.
Imagine him coming out of nowhere, when like completely randomized, like just keep you on your toes the entire game.
Yeah, like that would be fantastic, because I remember you could trick Nemesis. Like, there were certain rooms he could chase you in, and certain rooms that he couldn't. If you told me Nemesis could attack you in a save room, you better be wearing your brown pants.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you go to a save room, he's not in there, but you go to open the save room to leave, and he's at the door.
Yeah, see, that would be scary. And that's a game that would deliver legitimate tears, because Nemesis was way harder to take down than Mr. X. You would blow through clips taking him down.
And then I imagine if they follow this trend using this engine, you'll see, wasn't Res 4 considered the best in the series?
Res 4 is considered the best, but there was also Code Veronica before Resident Evil 4.
That was the Dreamcast one, right?
Yes. Which then got later enhanced versions for the GameCube and PS2.
So, but I could see them probably going with that. But I think the big one, if this doesn't go multi-console, that Res 4 will be the big one for the next gen.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be bad. I mean, because Resident Evil is a franchise, now that they're reinventing it, because Biohazard / Resident Evil 7 was a really good idea. It proved the franchise still had legs, because Resident Evil 6 was a mess.
I heard, and was it 6 or 5 that had the problematic, was it with racial relations or something?
That was number 5, where they had it set in Africa, and it was a white dude mowing down a bunch of African dudes, and that didn't go so well. Which,
in the defense of the developers, they didn't look into it because
it makes sense for the setting.
Well, and also they don't have the historical significance of that. They don't know that. They weren't thinking globally when they necessarily made it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it wasn't on them. It wasn't a deliberate thing.
Exactly. Plus, social attitudes have changed a lot in even just 10 years. So yeah, it was problematic then. It's problematic now. I don't think they'll redo 5 and 6. Even redoing 4, I don't think they should. They should if they want to follow the formula for these new games, rewrite the canon, and maybe instead of making Resident Evil 5 the return of Chris Redfield, I don't know, you could tell a better story and have it be a little bit less ridiculous.
You want to get away with it? Make it a new character. Okay. Make it a new character. Don't necessarily steep it in the lore a little bit, but you want to get around that potentially dangerous topic. Make the character a character created, like make you have the ability to make the character look however you want. And if you do that,
cool. And
then that eliminates any of the tensions that might have been around it.
Well, yeah, I mean, steep it in the lore, make the character your own, but with an established back. Kind of like, make him Commander Shepard, for lack of a better phrase.
That's exactly what I mean. So you can make the skin tone whatever you want, hairstyles, anything male, female, and then keep the rest of the story the same, but you could tailor it so that it's introducing a new character, because that would also leave them room that if they do make new Resident Evil games, that not everyone has to be the same characters that have been in every other game.
I should also mention there is a new Resident Evil project coming out sometime soon, and it's taking the Resident Evil 2 engine, but kind of applying the Resident Evil Survivor series for it. I don't remember much more about it.
Were those the ones that were on the
a little while ago?
Were those the ones that were on the Wii?
No, you're thinking of the PS2, where they were Resident Evil Survivor and Resident Evil Survivor 2.
No, I was thinking, what were the ones for the Wii? Was it Zero or something? Or not Zero? They were the ones where it was like the on-rail shooter.
Yeah, like Umbrella Chronicles.
Those that would be fairly easy to update with the new engine. That could be something that's like a holdover until they can get some of the bigger projects done.
Make that a VR game.
Yeah, make that a VR game for PlayStation 5.
Yeah, there you go. So moving on to our last story. This one's actually a follow-up to a story we covered a couple of months ago. So as you guys know, the Wes Craven estate, as reported by Bloody Disgusting, recently regained the rights to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Now, according to Bloody Disgusting, can exclusively report that the Craven estate has begun work on resurrecting Freddy, as they are actively taking pitches for a new Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, they don't know what the estate's plans are, or if they have any distributor or financial deals in place, but they've heard they're looking for both feature film pitches and concepts for a possible HBO Max series. So that being said, there's a lot of possibilities here. And I saw a really interesting pitch on Twitter, and I think it's worth following up on. So Robert Englund has said he wants to play Freddy one more time. Okay, cool. So in the story of Freddy Krueger, he's known as a child murderer, or child something or other, in Springwood, Ohio. We've established this, correct? So,
yes.
What if the first half of the movie has Robert Englund playing Freddy in the human world, and when Freddy is murdered, he becomes the new Dream Demon, and it's an entirely different actor. So you can have the torch passed on, and this gets us into the idea of a new Freddy, if you want to continue that series going forward. I don't think that's a terrible idea. Now, when Robert Englund put the makeup on for the Goldbergs last year on the episode called Mr. Knifey Hands, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, the Halloween special. It was pretty good.
He looked pretty good in it. And Robert Englund even said at a convention, or he said it on some public-facing front recently, he's got maybe one more in him.
One more feature. He said it wasn't hard doing that because it was only for 1 day shoot. But when you consider if he has to wear makeup for 12 hours a day for a course of 6 weeks, that's going to be one. You'll get one out of them unless they're smart and they do the Halloween thing and they shoot two back to back like they're doing with the new Halloween movies. If they did two back to back, you could probably shoot it in such a way that it wouldn't take 5 to 6 weeks per movie. You might only have to do 9 weeks for both. And if he did that, then he would get 3 years of because they'll space them out like a year or a year and a half apart. So that way you don't have to wait. Like he won't have to wait till he's like 75 to do another one. You know what I mean? Like if they filmed a few in a row, then he could do that. So that if they're confident enough, you could get 2 or 3 out of him. Just spend 10 months shooting the 3 movies, and then you get 5 years worth of pictures out of it, and he can retire happy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this character, I think, is iconic enough in horror to survive. I mean, Michael Myers, Halloween from last year took the idea of taking the established continuity and throwing it out the window. Because it even threw out Halloween 2, which really surprised me. So if you did a Nightmare on Elm Street and you did it as a direct sequel to Dream Warriors or a direct sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street 1, I would be okay with it and toss out the other canon.
If they don't want it to be silly, you can do, I guess, a sequel to 2.
No,
maybe?
2 is the shit one.
That was the
Do It
shit
to
one.
Dream Warriors, because that
Oh,
was the
that
one
was-
that was most well received.
Yeah. So okay. So take out 2 out of the canon and do like 1, 3, then this, or if you don't
Yes.
want to go, if you want to go, well, no, they already tried doing completely serious. They was when they redid the new one, which wasn't very good.
It had its moments, is what I'll say about it.
Sorry, the new one. Sorry, it was okay. I was thinking it was the what's it the
They've already done
Texas
meta.
Chainsaw was the terrible remake.
Yes, and they've already done meta, which they did in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and I want to say
Yeah.
95 or whatever.
That was 94
So-
because it was right before he did 94. He did Scream 2 years later. So
Yeah, because I was trying to place it around the big earthquake in LA. But I think if you did this right, you could hand the franchise off in a fairly significant and meaningful way. Because Robert should not be forgotten. He should be immortalized as Freddy. And it is possible to do. Because filmmaking rules in the last 5 years have been thrown out the window. We're disregarding sequel canon left, right, and center. As long as the movie's cool, that's all that matters. And the filmmaker's vision should matter. Now, it's sad that Wes Craven is no longer with us to give us that vision, but I would trust someone who has a love of the franchise to do it right. There's even a possibility... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, also let's be honest, he hadn't really made a good movie in 20 years when he was alive. Like Scream 1 was the last good movie he made. Was it Red Eye was a piece of garbage. Anything else he attached his name to, it was bad. Like it's sort of like John Carpenter. Like that one he did, The Ward, no good.
Mm-hmm.
And with him too, Ghost of Mars, no good. Stupid fun movie, but no good. He hadn't really made a good one since Vampires, and that movie in like 98 didn't even feel like it was even finished. It felt like it needed to be 20 minutes longer. Some of these guys that were really, really good, they're good only in name anymore. Like very few have been able to carry through and maintain the quality of their films. I almost feel like if it's not, I'm not trying to be sacrilegious, but if he was alive, that this property would be bad. Like I feel like he wouldn't have done it justice, and he would have tried to change too much because he wouldn't want it to be, you know what I mean? Like he wouldn't want it to be like his old works, so he would do something to make it different, and that might not actually work. So this is actually maybe a good thing that his estate's moving forward with somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll wait and see and find out what happens with that. I also saw recently a tweet from one of the people involved in the Friday the 13th franchise. I know that's been held up in legal mumbo jumbo for the last little while too. Supposedly the Court of Appeals will be hearing something in February. They're expecting a judgment in the case in June 2020. So what that means for Sean Cunningham and other people involved in the Friday the 13th franchise, hopefully it means we can get some progress on some fronts, but we're still not getting any new content for the Friday the 13th video game by Gun Media and Infophonic, which is tragic. It is what it is. Was fun while it lasted. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Nerd News. We're going to come back.
Everything you're about to see is true, except that foxes don't swipe. That is a hurtful stereotype. Brought to you by the Fox Council of the Americas. Thank you. Gracias.
We're looking at Dora and the Lost City of Gold, coming to us from Paramount Home Entertainment on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. This is a movie that I actually have a lot of history with, because I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. You're probably asking, well, Mike, why? So when I was younger, I used to babysit my friend Mary's kids quite a bit, Jonathan and Hazel, and that means I used to watch a lot of Dora the Explorer, and I was kind of surprised how much fun the show Dora was, and it was always kind of ridiculous because she'd use different languages and say, can you say Spanish word or French word or whatever it is to the kids on the TV, and she'd be like, can you tell me what this animal is? And she'd look at the TV and she'd blink a few times, and she'd have a talking backpack, there'd be a map, she'd have her cousin Diego, there'd be Swiper the fox, who's like my favorite character, there'd be Boots the monkey, and all the other characters that come from the Dora the Explorer world. So when I heard there's going to be a live action version of this, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of curious. And then when I saw the first trailer, I was surprised how much I thought, okay, This looks like baby's first Tomb Raider, or something along those lines. And I kind of figured between Paramount and Nickelodeon, they might be able to pull something special off here, especially if they can nail the tone right. And what Dora and the Lost City of Gold delivers is probably one of the most unexpectedly fun times I've had at the movies in quite some time. So the setup for Dora is her parents are like scientists or professors or something. They live in the jungle with her, and they send her off to the city to live with her cousin Diego, so she can be around kids her own age. And of course, as you can expect, high school shenanigans ensue, but somehow she gets drawn back to the jungle because her parents are missing, and they end up looking for this lost city of gold called Parapapa or something like that. And they're played by Ava Longoria and Michael Pena. I know Michael Pena from the Ant-Man movies, and I think Ava Longoria is from like Desperate Housewives or something. But the real star of the show is Isabella Monet, and she is beautifully cast as Dora. Like, literally, you could not have cast this role any better. She brings the right type of energy, enthusiasm. She looks like Dora. And it's just the right kind of on-screen charisma and presence I didn't expect from a kid's movie. The kid that plays Diego, Jeff Wahlberg, also brings a kind of low-key chemistry to that role as well. But Isabella really steals the show here. And over the course of the movie's runtime, it's hard not to have a smile on your face. Some of the other voice cast in this, because this is live action, not animated, you get Benicio del Toro as Swiper the Fox, though I wish he had more lines, but he is pretty funny. You also get Danny Trejo as Boots the Monkey at one point, which is really out of left field, although I'm pretty sure it's not him making the monkey noises, but he does speak. An unexpected cameo, you get Tamora Morrison, who you may recognize as Jango Fett or the clone troopers from Star Wars. Speaking of that, there's a bunch of really weird nerd references hidden in this movie. There's a National Treasure reference, Indiana Jones references, a Terminator one. There's even a hidden Starship Troopers one. My friend Alex pointed this out. They're at an airfield with all these mercenaries. Yeah, that's right. Dora meets up with mercenaries at one point, and you see Rico's Roughnecks emblazoned on the side of a warehouse. And Rico's Roughnecks is what the Starship Troopers unit, the mobile infantry unit, was called when Johnny Rico took over. So, unexpected nerd cred in this movie. And like I said, it's very much baby's first Tomb Raider, but it works. I had, like I said, a fantastic time with this movie. I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. Special features wise, it is kind of light. There is a feature on kind of exploring the character of Dora and her world. There's one where they talk about Dora in flower vision, which is probably one of the best sequences in the movie. It took me by such surprise. I couldn't help but smile during the whole time. There's one on the Jungle House, but they're typical, like, the electronic press kit features you get on YouTube or anything. They're nothing super spectacular, though the one exploring Dora and Flower Vision are two pretty cool ones that I do like. Overall, though, this is a very enjoyable movie. If you have kids, I highly recommend picking this up for them, especially since we're getting so close to Christmas. If you kind of grew up on Dora, I'd even recommend watching this as an adult. Even if you don't buy the movie, watch this on VOD. You're not going to be sorry for the time you spent with this. And it's cool. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I got to see Backpack. I got to see Map, Swiper the Fox, Boots the Monkey. I got everything I wanted from a Dora the movie that I didn't know I wanted, but I love it. So, big thanks to Mary and her kids for making me appreciate just how cool Dora the Explorer could be, and I kind of hope we see a sequel to this in the future.
What makes you qualified to be a reporter? I'm willing to violate anyone's privacy for my personal gain and then claim with a straight face that the public has a right to know.
By the hand of Zeus, what manner of deviltry is this?
I love fake alien poop day.
And it's Twig. I'm Mike. He's Alex. It's time to talk about the weird, strange, and just fucked up things that happened around the big blue marble this week. And we're going to talk a little bit of science because I love science. It's weird. It's wacky. It's hopefully kind of scary when you kind of break down to it. So evidently a human patient has been put into suspended animation for the first time. Suspended animation is probably one of those things you've probably heard about in like Star Wars, Star Trek. I think they put people into suspended animation in Star Trek when Khan during the eugenics war was found in the future. But anyway, so when a person suffers a severe trauma like a gunshot, I'm reading this from IFL Science, by the way. When a person suffers a severe trauma like a stab or gunshot wound, they can only lose so much blood that their heart stops beating, which makes standard CPR futile. Instead, surgeons open the chest and attempt to reroute blood to the heart and brain, but this often fails to save lives. So according to Professor Samuel Tischerman, you've got someone who's got an injury. It's fixable, but you've got no time to fix it. Of the University of Maryland School of Medicine, told an audience at the New York Academy of Sciences Symposium on November 18th. So how do you buy more time? That's where the concept of suspended animation comes in. Although, as Tischerman pointed out during his lecture, doctors are trying to get away from the sci-fi notion of suspended animation, calling it emergency preservation and resuscitation, or EPR instead. In a recent interview, Tischerman had told Helen Thompson at New Scientist magazine that his team had tested out EPR on at least one person, describing it as a little surreal. However, he did not say how many people had survived. We came up with this idea, and the fastest way we could cool the whole body... Oh, sorry, I missed a statement there. EPR involves rapidly cooling the body down so that the brain is at a chilly 10 to minus 15 degrees. So 50 to 59 Fahrenheit. Sorry, I got my things messed up there. Far below its usual 37 degree temperature, or 98 degrees Fahrenheit. This is done by pumping the brain full of very cold, salty water. We came up with this idea. The fastest way we could cool the whole body, particularly the brain and the heart, was just to flush the body with cold fluid. And salines is what we used. So being very cold slows the bodily processes and chemical reactions right down, meaning that the organs like the brain require much less oxygen than they would otherwise need. Once cooled in this cooled down state, the patient can be taken to the operating room where surgeons have up to 2 hours rather than a matter of minutes to get to work and repair the life-threatening damage. Once complete, the patient is resuscitated during a normal cardiopulmonary bypass, a machine that overtakes the functions of the heart and the lungs. The technique has proven successful on animals like pigs, so far with approval from the FDA. Tischerman's team is taking it to human subjects, since people whose hearts have stopped due to acute trauma are unlikely to survive. Consent by the patient is not required. However, the team printed ads in local newspapers telling readers how to opt out of the trial if they so wished. The plan is to test EPR on 10 patients using a further 10 as controls. These controls will be patients who arrive at the hospital when Tischerman's full team is not there, meaning EPR can't be carried out. EPR does have its drawbacks, however. It is possible to suffer cell damage when the body is warmed up and blood flow is restored. Exactly why this happens isn't completely clear, but certain medications might be able to counter the effects. The ultimate aim is for patients to survive without any significant neurological deficits. He finally says, we certainly hope that this kind of approach, basically just trying to stop the clock, buy time, maybe hypothermia, maybe with drugs, will allow us to save trauma patients that are currently dying in front of us. Hopefully in the future, we're going to have patients survive that otherwise would not. That's really friggin' cool.
It's also creepy.
It's creepy, yeah. Like, it's weird, because I've always heard of suspended animation because that's the next step to cryogenics. Cryogenics is where you have your body flushed of essential fluids replaced with something that doesn't allow ice crystals to form in your body, so you wouldn't turn into literally an icicle and shatter. And presumably they bring you back to life at a later date when after they found a cure for your disease, they found a way to reverse aging, or some process of bringing you back digitally, which is a concept that's been talked about in the last couple of years. But the fact that someone gets in a motorcycle accident, they can flush your fluids out to buy you more time till a trauma team can get to you. This could save a lot of lives, but seeing this rollout on a massive scale, because this is going to take years for doctors to be trained.
This is going to be 20 years before I think it's regularly attempted.
Exactly. This is not an easy process. It's highly specialized, maybe in the larger cities, but this is a first step towards something neat. It's definitely going to save lives, though. I'd be curious to know what happens. Like, as it did mention in the article, people have got some sort of damage, but as long as their brains aren't damaged, like you're not coming back more hurt than what you were before.
It's going to atrophy the muscles and stuff like that. Like, right? Because they're not moving.
Well, it's not so much that. It's fact when you flush things like when you're replacing all that blood with this cold, salty fluid, ice crystals can form in certain cells. And ice crystals are very bad. Ice crystals mean things pop. And that's why cryogenics isn't successful right yet. We can freeze you just fine, but if we warm you up too fast, you're going to form ice crystals, and then game over. Because there's nothing we can do to reverse that type of damage. But this sounds like
what this is going to do. This isn't going to be like the science fiction stuff where they freeze you and you get thawed out in 1,000 years in the future. This is going to be more like they do this to you so they can perform a 36-hour, very delicate operation on your brain where normally you would die from the blood flow changing. And this allows doctors to literally take 8 hours to sleep between while the surgery is still ongoing.
Or if you're in a car accident and a trauma team needs to get to you, this buys them an hour or two more to get a trauma team to you.
Or it'll stop your brain from swelling and dying. It'll slow you down to the point where they can operate.
Yeah, so that's cool stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this. I presume we'll hear more from Tischerman and his team in the future. So I will be keeping an eye on this story. This one's a little bit weirder. This one comes courtesy of CNN. Ann Cibal's cul-de-sac in Port St. Lucie, Florida. It's fairly quiet. Well, it wasn't until a dog hopped into the owner's running car, kicked it in reverse, and drove in circles for about an hour, smashed into a neighbor's mailbox before safely exiting the vehicle without so much as a scratch. Sable didn't know who was behind the wheel when she first spotted the car whirling around the block like an inept student driver. At first I thought I saw someone backing up, but then kept going, and I'm like, okay, what are they doing? Who's driving that car? A black Labrador retriever, either terribly frightened or joyfully free. Then the cops came, then the fire department. Authorities watched from a distance as the driving dog did donuts. Finally, the vehicle hit a mailbox and some garbage cans and then slowed down.
It makes me think of Stargate SG-1 in episode, was it 100 or 200? No, 200, when they do, you haven't seen it, but it's an episode where it's all like, it's because weirdness. Yeah, like it's all like flashbacks to things that they've done but they've never shown before. So it's all made up stuff. It's like, do you remember when we did this mission? And then it's like Family Guy. It'll cut to something ridiculous happening that never actually happened in the show. And there's one part like, do you remember that part where Jack turned invisible? And then I'm like, what? No, he never turned invisible. So they cut to it and it's made up new scenes, right? Mm-hmm. And he's invisible and you hear him snoring. And they're like, could somebody just poke around till you find him? And they're like poking around in the room. And then there's a part where they're like, where's Jack? It's like, well, he kind of likes being invisible. And then it shows his car driving up to the entrance to the Cheyenne Mountain. And the guard looks in and it's his dog driving. because he's invisible and he's sitting in the passenger seat. And the look on the guy's face as the dog turns his head to look at him. That's what it made me think of.
It's so strange, the fact that nobody caught on to this for an hour. Just a dog just doing donuts.
Probably thought some kid hijacked the car or whatever and just started driving around.
Now, I actually did this to my parents' car when I was a kid, not driving donuts for an hour. I was probably about 7 years old. My mom was playing bingo, and like a good responsible boomer, she left me in the car in the parking lot while she went to go play bingo. So good on you, Mom. So anyway, I throw the car into reverse. I don't know what I'm doing. I backed into the side of the Shao Lake Legion. Yeah, she tore a strip off me. I think she spanked me, but I'm not sure. Yeah, so the dog got away with it a lot longer than I did, but I can just imagine the police and the fire department standing around just watching this dog drive in circles. I'm actually really surprised that there's not video of this on YouTube. There might be. I closed the tab. So if like anybody has this, feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'd love to see it. So yeah, it's pretty weird. However, throwing my next story back into the medical field, this one's a little bit gross. This one comes courtesy of People.com. Doctor saves traveler's life by sucking urine from man's bladder during mid-flight emergency.
This sounds like a South Park thing.
A Chinese surgeon extracted 800 milliliters of urine from a blocked bladder of an elderly man during a mid-flight emergency. So I'm going to read this. So a Chinese doctor had to think on his feet when a passenger...
Can I make a guess?
Sure.
It didn't come out the way you'd expect.
No, yeah, this guy MacGyvered this. It's
okay, so
cool.
So this is like performing a tracheotomy, but not the way you'd think. Versus
kind of
this wasn't. He went for the straw.
Yeah, so Zhang Hong, a surgeon from the first affiliate hospital of Jinan University in, I can't pronounce where he's from, saved an elderly man's life by sucking urine from the traveler's blocked bladder during a medical emergency. Just kind of skimming over certain parts of it. The doctor who was flying from this place of origin I can't pronounce to New York on China's...
He was flying from one part of the world to another part of the world.
It was Guangzhou, maybe.
Cool.
So from Guangzhou to New York on China Southern Airlines.
So basically, he was flying from mainland China to the States, a direct flight, which is quite a long trip.
Yeah. So they were still 6 hours away from his destination when he sprang into action. The ill passenger was sweating and had a swollen belly, Zhang said. The man's family had also informed cabin crew that the traveler was previously diagnosed with unenlarged prostate, which Zhang suspected was causing a blockage. He was going into shock and may have suffered a risk to his life if we didn't tend to him urgently, the doctor was quoted as saying. Flight attendants set up blankets on the floor in an area towards the back of the plane for the passenger. Meanwhile, Zhang and another physician on board who has a name more complicated than I can even begin to pronounce. I wish I could pronounce some of these Chinese names because they sound cool. Anyway, they had reportedly fashioned a makeshift catheter out of a plastic tubing from an oxygen mask, straws from milk cartons, tape, and a syringe from the aircraft's medical kit.
So what you're saying, sorry, is that straws are actually good? And not those paper straws, like a good plastic straw is still good for certain uses?
Yep. So, however, the needle on the device was too small to drain the urine. After experiencing difficulties in easing the pressure on the passenger's bladder, Zhang stepped up to suck out the urine himself. The doctor spent 37 minutes draining approximately 800 milliliters of urine from the man's blocked bladder.
Oh my God. That's like a liter of pop, but it's just all pee.
Oh yeah.
That would be so ammonia. That would be so ammonia filled and so pissy, for lack of a better term. But you know what? Like that saved the guy's life. So
yeah. There's footage of this too. Footage of the life-saving act shows Zhang spitting into an empty wine bottle as he siphoned the urine out using his mouth. It was an emergency situation. I couldn't figure out any other way. According to the South China Morning Post, the passenger was told to lay down for another half hour after the procedure. He was reportedly examined by another physician upon landing. That is some MacGyver shit right there. And thank God the guy wasn't like a huge dude anyway.
Like if it had been you or me, that would have been difficult.
Oh yeah, we're dead. We are dead. Straight out. But just the fact that he used tubing from an oxygen mask, a syringe, plastic straws, and basically siphoned like you're siphoning gas out of a car.
Oh, okay. So it's not see the way you made it sound was you made it sound like he stuck he stuck a straw like he's sticking it in a juice box, and this was like
yeah. No,
he basically made a makeshift kit, so he wasn't as close to the body as you might think.
Yeah, but you still have to make a catheter. And as someone who's had a catheter in, fucking ow!
But you know what? If you're in the situation of you're in the kind of pain that guy was probably in, that it probably felt like nothing. It probably felt like relief almost immediately.
Probably, yeah. Because I've had, like I said, catheters in. I've had multiple catheters in the same day. And that's not a fun process. When you get something shoved up your urethra.
I have not had that, and I'm kind of hoping I never have to. But
you don't want this, man.
Only thing I can equate it to is I've had scopes done where they go down your throat or go up your butt for like colonoscopies, and those aren't fun as it is.
Yeah, it certainly makes me question things I've seen in movies, and I'm going to leave it at that. Final story.
So basically, the headline for this is "No Prince Albert for Michael."
Yeah. So final story this week. This one is yet another follow-up, and actually kind of a local angle. If you remember a while ago, this was like a phenomenon. Do you remember when people were seeing creepy clowns jumping out of the bushes or running along roads?
Italy. It was Italy originally, and then it happened in the States.
And then it happened in Orangeville, a place not far from where I'm currently living. So evidently, clown sightings are up. In the city in Japan, in the city called Ibarkari, I think it is. The last few weeks have left residents on edge. The weirdness began on the evening of November 2nd when a young boy was reportedly followed by a menacing stranger in a clown mask.
Which, okay, let's just be honest here. Clowns, you know, the clown like that, the traditional creepy or whatever clown, originates from like European antiquity. It's not, that design of a clown is not native to Asia. So how freaky is that if that's not part of your culture to begin with, and you just see like creepy Ronald McDonald coming after you?
Yeah, it's so weird. So evidently, a couple days later, a kid was followed, and then a young woman was also followed. So 3 people got followed by this weirdo in a clown mask. The police were not able to locate them. It's weird though. The encounters continued for a week when a pair of school children were followed by this. So this guy's probably pretty fucked up.
Imagine though, like, you know me, you know my size, my stature. Yeah. Imagine if I put on like a, you know, big man's one suit overalls like a mechanic would wear, and put on a clown mask, and being 6'4", if I just stepped out of the crowd and just stood in like Tokyo and just stood with my mask on staring at people as they crossed the street without turning my head, what would happen? Just the long stare. And like as they walk by you, don't even turn your head with them. You just keep staring in that direction. And then when they look for a while, then you turn your head very slowly towards them.
You know what's weird? Clowns have really come back into the culture in the last couple of years. I mean, we've had Pennywise the clown, the clown sightings, the Joker being very successful.
Do you know where I blame it? I don't even blame it on the Joker. I don't blame it on Heath Ledger's Joker, any of that. I don't even blame it on like what was happening in Italy when they were doing that for those hidden camera shows. Yeah. I blame it on Five Nights at Freddy's. For whatever reason, that the creepy look of that seems to have coincided with a lot of these things happening.
Yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's is certainly, and it was a huge cultural phenomenon too for a while.
Yeah,
which is, by the way, coming out on the Switch this week, which I kind of hope to get actually.
You know what? I feel that like because that hit so huge with like millions and millions of views worldwide, and like PewDiePie and all these people, I feel like it hit a whole new generation of like things that are supposed to be cuddly that end up being creepy, and that sort of is what brought it into the forefront.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong, because it's kind of a thing now to turn something cute and innocent into something scary and menacing.
What's that girl's doll line that came out around the same time? Monster High?
Yeah.
That sort of
just
thing.
Kind of turning something on its head just enough. Yeah, I get that. So hopefully this weirdo will stop freaking people out just because they can.
And if you haven't seen those old videos, well, not old, but like those videos from a couple of years ago in Italy where it's like guy with a clown with a giant sledgehammer in like a parking garage, and then he'd wait till people came out and then smash a dummy body, but it would explode with like fake blood everywhere. Seeing the people's reactions as they scream and run away is hilarious. But that was for like a hidden camera show. The problem was everybody copied it. It's like, and you're like going to Orangeville and there's like people doing that there. It's one thing for Italian television. It's another thing entirely when it happens in, butt F nowhere.
Yeah, it's another thing when it's a private individual with some unknown agenda. So anyway, that's what we have to cover this week on the weird news. What do we got coming up next? We have a review. Alex is going to bring us a review of the new Nvidia Shield, correct?
Yeah, Nvidia Shield TV. There's two versions. There's the Pro, which is the one that had the traditional box, like Android box. This is the spherical, not spherical, the almost like, I call it the toilet paper one. Only because
that's what it looks like.
Because that's what it looks like. It's a tube, very compact, but still has a fan in there. Very surprising. Overall, pretty good impression. I think, it's going to, without even going into the review, I think it's going to be something that it's a sort of a sleeper hit when it comes to tech devices this winter.
All right, so we'll be back right after this, only on This Week in Geek, otherwise known as TWIG, the flagship of stupidity.
We are quickly approaching the holiday buying season, and this is the time of year that a lot of consumer products start to launch, and we have the new 2019 edition of the Shield TV from Nvidia to check out. I've spent the last week or so sort of throwing everything I can at it to sort of see what its limitations are, and as far as like streaming media, there really isn't any limitation that this doesn't have anything that it can't play, which is actually the first time I've encountered that, where even like super high frame rate videos play on it. So just a little bit of background here. People know of the Shield TV in the past. It's come out. It's a standard sort of Android box style, but they've changed the form factor up for this release. This is more of a tube, almost I guess the thickness of a broom handle, if that makes any sense. And there is the Pro version, which is basically the same as this, but I received the Shield TV Standard Edition to review. The only difference between the two is there's an extra gig of RAM, which is only really going to help for some gaming and like emulation, that sort of dealy. And it also has 2 USB ports instead of an SD card slot, so that you can plug in extra hard drives. Now, I am going to say that for the most part, unless your needs are plugging in, a larger external drive, or going for like top end gaming that you could basically maximizing what you can do with it, it's not necessarily worth the extra $50 or so to get the Pro version. I think the Shield TV is pretty representative of the experience. Now, the main thing about this is, like I said, it's a tube, so you plug everything into it in either side. There's power on one side plus an Ethernet port for gigabit Ethernet. The other side has HDMI as well as a micro SD slot. I had an extra 200 gig SD card lying around because I had just upgraded to a 256 gig one for my Switch Lite. Now, putting in something like a Class 10, something that has decent read speed is what's required. You do not need to have something like an A1 or A2 class SD card, which is what's used for applications if you chose to, let's say, install it and make it an internal drive permanently. I did not. I wanted to make sure that I could easily pop in and out the SD card so I could load it up with extra videos and extra home content that way. In doing so, one criticism I have of this device, probably the only criticism, is that the micro SD card is difficult to pull out once you've inserted it. It does have a spring-loaded mechanism so that when you pop it in, it holds it in place, obviously. But when taking it out, the space to pull it out is very difficult. You'd have to have very small fingers, and I have fairly large fingers. So I actually had to use like tweezers for the most part to pull it out properly without, prying at it. So that's the only thing I can see improving, is maybe the location of that, but there isn't a whole lot of real estate on this for where else you could put the micro SD card reader. So if you're not going to be popping it in and out nearly as much as I am, and you can use things like FTP or other ways to transfer your data over to it, But for me, for simple use, I just like to pop it out, pop it in my main computer, copy over whatever video or music I want to play on it, and go from there. Now, as far as video files, it plays everything. I mean, you can install Videoland Player if you wanted to, get the ability to play pretty much any format. But I'm saying, when I say it plays everything, I mean it plays everything well, and you don't have to worry about any stuttering. I went through the gamut of getting some 4K video that was at 60 frames per second, Big Buck Bunny, and as well as some other sort of industry standard testing videos to see if there's any frame rate drops or anything. And there's nothing. Like, you can put super high data frame, like I had on my memory card, like a 12 gig file, of like 120 or 130 megabits per second, 60 frames per second, 4K HDR encoded files, and I was able to use the remote and sort of skip through with no issues, no stuttering, no frame rate drops. To give an example, like something like that, you need like a modern, regular, like multi-core PC, like a $600 PC, to be able to do that without, regularly. So the Tegra X1 Plus CPU that's in this, which is also in the Nintendo Switch refreshes and the Switch Lights. It's pretty much the best system on a chip or CPU GPU combo that I've ever seen for media playback, especially on something that is in such a small device. And the fact that it only has 2 gigs of RAM. A lot of other Android boxes that you see online will advertise 4 gigs of RAM, but they're always very inefficient, or they're cheaply made Chinese products that aren't really taking advantage of their CPU. This is one of those cases where it never even used more than a gig of RAM while playing those 4K HDR super high frame rate videos. So because of that, they saw fit to put 2 gigs of just fast, good RAM in here. The AI upscaling, I only noticed it a little bit, turning it on and off. I didn't see such a huge, dramatic increase in quality or change in that. But it is nice to see that it does have that ability. What that means is it has artificial intelligence in there that will upscale your video and sort of looks at the video and the movement in it and determines the best way to upscale it. So on sort of a case-by-case basis, which is pretty cool. Now, this being the new refresh that has the Tegra X1 Plus processor means that it supports not just HDR, but Dolby Vision. I don't have a Dolby Vision television. My brother does. So we popped it onto his TV, and you could see that, it, for watching content on the Apple TV Plus, which has Dolby Vision enabled on some of their videos, you could see there was a bit of a difference. So the fact that, I can confirm it, yes, it does support it, and it works quite well. There's also, it supports Dolby Digital Plus for audio, which is pretty standard on these, but also Dolby Atmos. Not everything has Dolby Atmos support. 8 gigs of storage built in, which is plenty for any of the videos I put on. I even put some games on to try out. Especially if you're going to be expanding it, I would suggest getting a 200 or gig or better micro SD card, which you can get for less than $40. And that would really expand it, so you can put all your music library or whatever movies or anything else you have. You could have it downloaded directly to it. You can format the card internally so that it uses it as storage. If you do that, make sure you get something that's an A1 or A2 class, which means application class micro SD. What that means is it's not just that it's really fast for reading or writing large files. It's also fast for copying and reading small files, which is what a hard drive does on a regular basis. So Bluetooth 5.0 didn't really end up using that, but you could use that to broadcast right to your headphones or something like that, or to connect a gamepad controller to it. Gigabit Ethernet, and it also has wireless AC dual band multi-in multi-out, which is really important. You're going to get a really good wireless experience in here, which is something that a lot of these TV boxes have been lacking. And they advertise on here, 256 core NVIDIA GPU. Here's the thing. If you know the kind of gaming experience and video playback experience you get on the Nintendo Switch or the Google Pixel C from back in the day, it's that plus a little more because the X1 Plus processor is advertised at 20 to 25% better as far as processing speed. It's not about that. It's more about the efficiency of it and the ability to be able to do the latest technology in HDR decoding as well as Dolby Atmos audio. So in that, it's basically what they released 2 years ago in a smaller form factor with a more efficient CPU with support for the newest HDR technologies. The OS on it is buttery smooth, and the really cool thing is actually the controller. The remote control is sort of a weird pyramid shape. It's sort of triangular. It feels good in the hand. It has light up buttons that if you raise it towards your face to see what's on there, it lights them up. There is built-in voice controls, which I tested out and actually work quite well. And it appears like the battery's going to last forever. It's one of those things where it's a very efficient controller. It turns itself off when not in use, but then immediately turns itself back on. The closest I can think of something that's this responsive for a smart device would be the old PlayStation 3 Blu-ray remote that was Bluetooth. That was actually quite a good remote. Similar to that, this is a streamlined button scheme, very easy to use. You can wake up the system, turn it off. And it's nothing much more needs to be said about it. It feels like a premium product, both the actual device and the controller. And I can't really say much more. I spent the weekend basically putting it through its all its paces, all the tests on it. Played anything I threw at it, any file format. It was buttery smooth, especially doing streaming. The buffering on it, on a decent Wi-Fi connection was great. I even took it to see family. Like I said, we tried it using the old 2G network. Everything worked buttery smooth. I had no issues. It even updated a system update very quickly and was right back into the action. And because the controller is Bluetooth, it actually was able to update the controller as well. So your remote control can get firmware updates to make it more efficient, which is pretty neat because not every device has that ability. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up. It's retailing, depending if you're in the States or Canada, roughly $200 Canadian. It's going to be one of those hot ticket items. If you don't have a decent streaming box or you don't have a smart TV, and even if you do, this is actually a more powerful device than pretty much anything in a smart TV currently. It's going to be hard to not recommend it. As far as the difference between it and the Shield TV Pro, it's just the form factor is a little different. The extra $50 gets you a couple of USB-A ports to plug in your own drives versus the micro SD and an extra gig of RAM. So if you're somebody who wants to do a lot more gaming, that may be what you want to focus on is the Pro version. But if you're somebody that wants just a quick and easy way to play pretty much anything, this is going to be probably the way to go. So that's the Shield TV. I'm going to recommend it. We're going to talk about it probably again on our gift guide coming up in a few weeks. But as of right now, this has become my go-to home media player.
We hope you've enjoyed your time with us today here on this particular podcast because, hey, if you're American, I'm pretty sure Thanksgiving is this weekend. So hopefully you will have a fantastic time. We will have a show on Monday for you, Monday or Tuesday, depending on how things work out. As always, we do hope you're checking us out on ThisWeekInGeek.net. You should be able to hear us on the Cambridge Chronicles this coming Saturday at twitch.tv/Terrible Warriors, where we investigate the town of Magnetawan, where we are tracking down the elusive Dr. Michael Scott, who is a drone technologist who holds the patent on some technology that one of the mega corporations of the future definitely wants to get their hands on. Plus, we're also talking about running Cyberpunk Red by R. Talsorian Games next year on the stream. I reviewed the box set last week, and I really think the world is something special. I'm really looking forward to Cyberpunk more than I ever have been, now that I kind of got my idea of what the Red is and the Fourth Corporate War and all that shit, and Johnny Silverhand's maybe dead, but maybe not. So it's going to be cool. I'm really kind of looking for it. And I just kind of realized Cyberpunk 2077 kind of has a major spoiler in it for Cyberpunk Red. Because in the book, they say they found his body. But he's alive in 2077. All right, well, fucking A. Johnny Silverhand, Keanu Reeves.
Or at least digitally alive.
Yeah, because you don't know whether that's in the nets or whether it's real. So that's a good interpretation.
They have said in the trailer when they were talking about, remember they had that 50-minute trailer, that he only appears to you. So
okay, so maybe
his consciousness is alive as an AI, and the idea is he wants to fix the world or fix the town, and he can always get a body whenever you want to download his tech. But basically, he's alive in the net.
Yeah, like it's really fantastic. Like if you get a chance to check out the Cyberpunk Red Jumpstart kit, it's worth it just for the world book because it updates the stuff from the 90s in a wonderful way.
Think about
this. The rules are really simple.
It's a world book. Like, so you get a lore book, you get a basic sort of rule book. You get little player avatars that you can pop out. There's also a few maps in there and some dice, and it's like $30 US. So
yeah, I think it's totally worth it.
So for that, like if you compare that to some of the other starter editions, wasn't it the Shadowrun one is kind of stupid expensive? Isn't it like $60 for a starter edition?
I don't think it's that expensive, but I think it's probably around 40. Don't quote me on that.
I'm sorry. I think it's about 60 Canadian. I think it's
not exactly cheap.
Yeah, it's not, and a lot of the other ones too. Or if you do get a starter edition at the $20 or $30 price point, they usually don't come with a lore book.
Not as one as in depth, because a lot of these games require a lot of buy-in, whereas stuff like, say, Pathfinder or Shadowrun, or not Shadowrun, D&D, it's basically generic fantasy. There's elves, dwarves, and who gives a shit. With Cyberpunk worlds and settings, there's a lot of the world you have to set up, and it requires a certain degree of player buy-in, which I think's the best thing you can do. But you can also buy complete games for $30 too. There are some wonderful ones. If you listen to Terrible Warriors, I'm sure Justin has recommended a shit ton of them. So
there's all those, or you can go with something more open like the Fate Core and that. But I think it's a pretty good starting point, especially if you're going to be a big fan. If you're a big fan of what you've seen with the Cyberpunk game trailers, this might be a good way. Like, you can get the game, play it a little bit with some friends over the next few months, and you'll be ready for when the game launches, and you'll already be able to like hit the ground running.
Exactly, and then there will be a full Cyberpunk 2077 game, a full tabletop RPG. Presumably, will come out probably, if I had to guess, sometime next summer. Probably at Gen Con.
Yeah, because this is the starter pack, and then the full book, which is going to be, one of those thick mothers that has all the stuff in it. That's coming at a later date. I don't believe they've announced a date for that just yet. But
not that I've seen.
They have said that I believe it's pre-orders of Cyberpunk 2077 will get a digital copy of
2020. I think.
Of the
original.
of the second edition that was from the early 90s, the one that we have actually.
Yes. So hopefully, like I said, you people will check it out and appreciate it.
So think about that. If you're somebody who wants to get those games, if you pre-order it, you're going to have the edition from the 90s. And then if you buy this for $30, you can get sort of the stopgap between it. Then you'll have the actual like RPG game, like the video game, and then you have the book. Like, that's when you add it all up together, that's actually a lot of lore and a lot of stuff coming out within the next year for them. That's pretty good.
Exactly. Considering how much our Talsorian has grown in the last year, I'm really impressive. So anyway, we will have a Black Friday special with Alex, who's going to be hosting it solo this year. He's got a lead on some really cool stuff you guys can check out. G Fuel, which is a particular interest to me, is holding a BOGO sale, which runs until December 2nd.
Yeah,
so
I'll basically
buy
be
one
going
tub, get one free.
Exactly. And I'll be going over, it's not going to be like everybody's like, get this game, I'm going to be going over like, here's where you can get some deals on it. Is it worth the rush to the store for it? Is it worth getting digital? And then, might talk about some things that are related to it, some other tech, not just games. Because most people, like, you watch a lot of YouTubers or other gaming people, they're like, only get this. And I'm like, well, there's also headphones. There's also things that go along with it that you might want to keep an eye out for, or extra controllers, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to sort of do a deep dive and see what's worth getting. And it's not going to be a long show. I'm aiming for, 15 to 25 minutes because it's just sort of giving it what's there. And then this week, do we have, is there another Nerd to the Third?
No, we are taking, actually, there may be a show out this week, but we're not recording this week.
Okay, so there might be something. If there is, we'll post it. I believe, are still going to be on. It's either Alter Geek or Future Imperfect this week. It depends on what Steve's putting out for the GCRN. Because I know we recorded a few different shows with him, so that's going to be coming out. There's probably going to be a Turtle Treasure. It all depends. It might not be this week. It might be next week. It just depends on timing, because we don't want to cram everything together.
Yeah, so as always, look forward for our holiday gift guide coming out on the second week of December. There will be 2 prototypes in December. We will be talking about the Game Awards 2019. We'll also be talking year-end in gaming, what we really enjoyed this year, what were disappointments, looking at you, Anthem, and we'll talk about all that and more. So until next time, we have been
Alex.
I've been Mike the Birdman Dodson. Live free or die hard. And as my friend Jackie Bam Bam might say, be cool, be kind, be careful. We'll catch you again right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Well, that's our show. All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.
My parents seriously gonna get divorced? All right, Rick, I'm gonna go to my...
Not so fast, Morty. You heard your mom. We've got adventures to go on, Morty. Just you and me. And sometimes your sister and sometimes your mom. But never your dad. You want to know why, Morty? Because he crossed me.
Okay, take it easy, Rick. That's dark.
Oh, it gets darker, Morty. Welcome to the darkest year of our adventures. First thing that's different, no more dad, Morty. He threatened to turn me into the government, so I made him and the government go away.
Oh...
I've replaced them both as the de facto patriarch of your family and your universe. Your mom wouldn't have accepted me if I came home without you and your sister, so now you know the real reason I rescued you. I just took over the family, Morty, and if you tell your mom or sister I said any of this, I'll deny it, and they'll take my side because I'm a hero, Morty. And now you're gonna have to go and do whatever I say, Morty, forever. And I'll go out and I'll find some more of that Mulan Szechuan teriyaki dipping sauce, Morty, because that's what this is all about, Morty. That's my one-armed man. I'm not driven by avenging my dead family, Morty. That was fake. I'm driven by finding that McNugget sauce. I want that Mulan McNugget sauce, Morty. That's my series arc, Morty. If it takes 9 seasons, I want my McNugget dipping sauce, Szechuan sauce, Morty. That's what's going to take us all the way to the end, Morty. 9 more seasons, Morty. 9 more seasons until I get that dipping Szechuan sauce. For 97 more years, Morty. I want that McNugget